My guest today is David Horsager. David Horsager is an internationally recognized speaker, best-selling author, and one of the world's leading experts on trust in leadership and business. He is the CEO of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute and has dedicated his work to helping leaders and organizations become the most trusted in their industry. David is the inventor of the Enterprise Trust Index, director of the annual The Trust Outlook Study, and the national best-selling author of The Trust Edge and Trust Matters More Than Ever.
Like, there's only one reason I'd put a lock on anything. I wouldn't put it on my bicycle, my home, or my car, except for I don't trust. So what is the cost of putting a lock on something? Well, number one, I got to buy the lock. That's money. Secondly, I got to open it every time I go through the gate. What if it's a combination lock? Forevermore. So I'm not saying we don't have to have locks. I'm not saying that we should trust everyone. I'm not saying that at all. We shouldn't. But we have to see that the biggest cost we have is a lack of trust. Even works out more simply than just attrition, retention, and sales and everything else. It's like people can just think about someone on their team that has their back. They trust them. That's so awesome. These 8 are how trust is built. And it doesn't matter if it's a brand or working with corruption issues in East Africa or with the New York Yankees or FedEx or whatever. It always comes back to these 8 contextualized in their space. Number one is clarity. People trust the clear, they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. Lose clarity, lose trust. Clarity wins today, and it's a whole new level. If you have a big character problem, it's going to poison everything anyway. If you have other things that's they can be bigger problems. Most people actually have a pretty good heart and actually want what's best, and the character is in the midst of the terrible news and everything happening in our world. Character usually isn't the first. Commitment, some of these things that people think and want to blame it on, the biggest problem that everybody, including me, can do something about is clarity.
Welcome to Iron and Empathy. I'm your host, Drew Moldenhauer. Iron and Empathy is sponsored by Blue Ethos Specialized Training, a national leader in workplace violence prevention, active threat preparedness, and de-escalation training. At Blue Ethos, we don't just focus on safety. We help organizations improve workplace culture by strengthening communication, increasing situational awareness, and creating environments where people feel supported, empowered, and prepared to intervene early before problems escalate. If this is your first time listening to Iron and Empathy, welcome. I'm really grateful you are joining us. Let's get into today's conversation. My guest today is David Horsager. David Horsager is an internationally recognized speaker, best-selling author, and one of the world's leading experts on trust in leadership and business. He is the CEO of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute and has dedicated his work to helping leaders and organizations become the most trusted in their industry. David is the inventor of the Enterprise Trust Index, director of the annual The Trust Outlook Study, and the national best-selling author of The Trust Edge and Trust Matters More Than Ever. Widely respected books on the impact of trust in leadership, culture, and performance. As a dynamic and sought-after keynote speaker, David has delivered his message across the United States and on 6 continents, working with clients that range from Fortune 100 companies to professional sports teams and global governments. His presentations are known for being practical, engaging, and packed with actionable insight that leaders can immediately apply. David, thanks for joining me today on Iron and Empathy. Where are you joining us from today?
Today I'm in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. So I travel a lot, but I'm at our offices, 3-story building next to Pezzo Pizza.
Fantastic.
61. So yeah. And I live out on the, out towards Stillwater. So.
Oh, fantastic. I love that area. I did a triathlon out in White Bear this past summer, and I absolutely love that area, that lake and everything around it. It is awesome. So, David, just to kind of kick things off, when you think about trust, what does it really mean beyond just the buzzword?
Well, yeah, I believe, a lack of trust is the biggest cost in a company, in an organization, in a, police department. It's always the biggest cost. And basically, fundamentally, in its simplest form, trust is a confident belief. A confident belief in a person, product, and organization to do the same thing consistently. So, I can have trust for good or bad. If you're late consistently, I'll trust you to be late, right? So when we talk about, we go one step further in my original work, is called the Trust Edge. This is Trust Edge Leadership Institute. So gaining the trust edge is trust toward positive outcomes. And so this kind of belief in a person, product, and organization. But the biggest benefit, the biggest uniqueness of my research that started, 25, 30 years ago, there's two big sides of it. And that first side was how we show a lack of trust is the biggest cost. It's always a trust issue. Like without ego and work across 6 continents from, as governments to, civic to biggest business, Walmart and whatever else, it's not a leadership issue. You follow someone based on trust. It's not a sales issue. You buy based on trust. It's not an innovation issue. When a team doesn't trust each other, they won't share ideas. And so they lost creativity and innovation. Marketing messages are only amplified when I trust the message. In a classroom, let's say your kids go to school. There's only one way to increase learning in the classroom, and that is increase trust in the content, the teacher, or the safety or trust of the room. And you know a lot about that. But if you don't have, safety is a synonym of trust in many ways. So that was, the first half was just showing the impact of trust.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And when you say that, it just resonates so well because I'm thinking back to, the teams I've worked with. There has been ones that I didn't trust. I didn't share ideas with. I thought, hey, someone's going to try and climb the ladder over me, or they're just going to knock me out of the way. We don't have this good cohesiveness. And I've never thought about it that way, but that's a really good point is, that trust really builds that teamwork around that. So I love that.
We spent the biggest amount of the research on the second half, which is how to build it, because there's actually some surprises there. But still in that first half, without giving you all the research, and there's a load of it now, and you can look at our studies, we pay for out of the Institute, and we give them free because we want that research to be trusted, not sponsored, not, we're a chocolate company that says eat 10 pounds a day because we sponsored our own study, So it's like the number one reason in first world countries that people want to work for an organization, number one reason in first world countries, not pay, compensation, not a more fun work environment with a ping pong table. It is trusted leadership over everything else. So the reason people buy, trust. The reason we will work longer hours, trust. So if I was going to simplify it right off the bat, just this first half of the research, the cost, maybe a lock is a good example. Like there's only one reason I'd put a lock on anything. I wouldn't put it on my bicycle, my home, or my car, except for I don't trust. So what is the cost of putting a lock on something? Well, number one, I got to buy the lock. That's money. Secondly, I got to open it every time I go through the gate. What if it's a combination lock? Forevermore. So I'm not saying we don't have to have locks. I'm not saying that we should trust everyone. I'm not saying that at all. We shouldn't. But we have to see that the biggest cost we have is a lack of trust. And it even works out more simply than just attrition, retention, and sales and everything else. It's like, think about, people can just think about someone on their team that has their back. They trust them. Oh, that's so awesome. Now think of someone on your team you don't trust. It's the biggest stress you have at work. Think of a kid. You got teenagers like I do going to the ball game with friends you trust. Great. You got someone as a parent, you got kids going out with friends you don't trust, biggest stress you have as a parent. So there's a massive cost to a lack of trust in performance, in outcomes, and it is the leading indicator of everything people are wanting. If people can just shift their thinking and see it's a trust issue, they start to solve the real issue. We don't have an attrition issue, we have a trust issue. That lowers attrition. We don't have a sales issue, it's a trust issue. We don't have a engagement. Doesn't go up unless I increase trust. Referral, net promoter score. We're working with the chief culture officer at United Health Group. He's like, oh man, it just hit me over the head. Our NPS doesn't go up by trying to get more referrals. Our net promoter score only goes up when we increase trust. That's the leading indicator of higher referrals. So if we can just shift thinking, then we can start to solve the real issue.
So with that, what you're saying that when you're looking at some of the research, it's showing that even if people will take a little bit less in pay, or they'll even work a couple extra hours, as long as they have trust in the organization, trust in the leader, is that kind of one of the things that you're seeing?
We definitely, people want to be paid fairly, but I'm just saying people, if they do trust leadership or trust those they work with, they'll work longer, they'll stay longer, they'll be more engaged, they'll perform better, and a host of other things. That's what the research shows.
And what would you say, David, in your opinion, is the number one way that we can start building? If we have this organization and maybe we have a lack of trust in there, how can we just, in very layman's terms, simple terms, start building better trust in our organizations?
So that's a very good question and a complex one. And I think it just begs the framework, which is how trust is built globally. We contextualize this around the world, but this is the framework. And the thing is, to say it's one thing is to say it depends. It's the 8-pillar framework, and I don't go into it deeply, but it's in a lot of my books. But I'll give you a word to remember. They're C words, but don't think of them as kind of cheesy pastoral lists. They each represent a big research funnel, and a lot falls under them. And then under those in our work, you have a bunch of tools that build those pillars. So there's, in the last book, Trust Matters More Than Ever, there's 40 tools that 3 pages. Here's what you do to build that pillar. Here's what you do to build, here's things in that situation. How do you build trust, in the middle of conflict? Oh, this method. How do you build trust when things are unclear? Here's a method. But first of all, I'll try to do it quickly but I think for reference, even though you might say, well, I wanted a speaker with 3 points in a poem. The problem is when you talk about trust and 8 came out of the research, I feel like I got to at least give context and give all 8. Then we'll just go deeper on 1 or 2 and you can choose and we can talk about those because in each situation, they might be a little different. And I can tell you where I would normally start, but I'm just going to give you all 8 really quickly. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Love it.
These 8 are how trust is built. And it doesn't matter if it's a brand or working with corruption issues in East Africa or with the New York Yankees or FedEx or whatever. It always comes back to these 8 contextualized in their space. Number 1 is clarity. People trust the clear. They mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. I was a professor, want to be complex and look smart. Whenever I do, lose clarity, lose trust. Clarity wins today. And it's a whole new level. Clarity wins for everybody. A leader that's not clear about the vision doesn't tend to be followed. A salesperson, they're often clear about the wrong things. They're clear about how cool they are. Nobody cares. They start to get clear about the benefits of that product or service. People started to buy because they were clear about the right thing. A teacher, they're a kind teacher. Why don't the kids like the teacher? Turns out the teacher was unclear about assignments, so the kids go home frustrated. So clarity is one way and I'm talking different than branding experts and strategy experts. We have some processes, some of the tools that take it down to incredible clarity, and that's when they win in this noisy world. Number 1 is clarity. Number 2 is compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. I mean, you know this so well, Drew, but basically, if you don't care beyond yourself, I have a hard time being accountable to you or following you. Lots of data around that. Number 1 most trusted person in the world to the most people is not Oprah or the Pope. It is, in fact, Mom. And that's because she's willing to sacrifice in general and show care. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right over what's easy. Lots around character that you can imagine. It has to be defined. It's a mix, not just integrity, a mix of moral character and integrity to get what I mean by it, because integrity on its own, people can say, well, Hitler had more of that than Churchill. If you're going to define it by being the same in just thoughts, words, and actions, Hitler was way more consistent in many ways. But, Churchill thankfully had us in the midst of his drinking and carousing all night long, a moral character that made decisions that was selfless for others, So number 4 is competency. We trust those that stay fresh, relevant, competent, and capable. This is really, I might trust Drew to take my kids to the ball game, but I won't trust him to give me a root canal, right? So it's being competent in the area you want to be trusted. People, and you have to be fresh. You and I know speakers that are saying the same thing they were 20 years ago, and they're not speaking anywhere. You have to stay fresh and relevant and capable. That's why we built this on research and everything else. The next one is commitment. We tend to trust those that stay committed in the face of adversity. If I think when things are tough, you're going to leave, I'm not going to trust you. So under this pillar, you'll find the steps for rebuilding trust. But the core of it is you never rebuild trust unless you make and keep a new commitment. It's the only way. It's not on the apology. I'm sorry I'm late. No, you're not. You're late every time. It's the next one is connection, collaboration. So we trust those that tend to be willing to connect with others and collaborate with others. In each of these pillars has counterforces. So in a company, if I see siloing, I know that's a counterforce to this pillar. It's just like if I see a lot of a counterforce to competency is usually arrogance. I already know it all. Well, that's the counterforce. Complexity is the counterforce to clarity. So anyway, so that's that one. The next one is seventh pillar is contribution. And the number one word that came out of that funnel was results. We trust those that contribute results. You could be the kindest surgeon I ever met. We go in for amputation. You cut off the wrong leg. We got a problem. So you've got to deliver the results. And that's the same. In public safety, we need safety. We can't just have kind officers. We can't just have this. We actually want to be safe. You know, with my field, I got to get yield on that corn. I can't just have fertilizer. You know, we got to get an outcome. So they all matter, by the way. People say, well, I just trust results. That's all. No, you don't. You have someone that comes in with bad character over time, you will lose all the results you ever hoped for. On the other hand, you have someone that's really kind and compassionate and they're sweet as can be. They don't ever get results. You got a problem too. So final pillar is the queen and king of the pillars, and that is consistency. Sameness is trusted for good or bad. And you can look at all of these. If you're just clear at the annual meeting and you haven't been clear consistently, you're losing. Right. If you have just compassion with people that look like you, that's not really compassion, and you're losing. So consistency amplifies all of them. That's the pillars. But in this moment, before I just catch my breath, it basically is, if people can take this list of 8 even without all my research and books and everything else, and just put it on the refrigerator, their desk, or the truck, and say, what's the real issue here? They start to solve the real issue, because it is always one of these 8. It's not leadership, some big word, engagement. It's not even, people say, David, I see you love C words. Is it ever a communication issue? Frankly, at the core, I know what you mean with due respect, but it is never, ever, 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 ever a communication issue. It is the type. Clear communication is trusted, unclear isn't. Compassion is trusted, hateful isn't. Honest is trusted, the character pillar. Dishonest communication is not. So if we can just take these 8 and say, oh, I wish I had a better relationship with my 15-year-old daughter. Oh, which one is missing right now? I want to have a more, I've got a nutrition problem. I wonder if we connected more. I wonder if, this is the problem. We're losing trust every second if we're not consistently building it. So.
And within those teams that you work with and that you go out and you do the research on, is there one of those, because they're all very important, is there one of those that usually stands out as that's kind of the bullseye? What is that one?
Yeah. So if I don't know where to start, number one, I start with clarity. Why? If you have a big character problem, it's going to poison everything anyway. If you have other things, they can be bigger problems. But the reason most people actually have a pretty good heart and actually want what's best, and the character is in the midst of the terrible news and everything happening in our world, character usually isn't the first. Commitment, some of these things that people think and want to blame it on, the biggest problem that everybody, including me, can do something about is clarity. And you can do something about clarity and see results in a week. And most people think they're clear when they're not. And I'm talking about clarity at a whole new level, Drew. Like today, there's a hair salon. Barb wanted to have this fun little salon that was all sweet, so she called it Whispers on Main Street. Nobody knew what the heck she was doing there. She changed it to Best Cuts by Barb. People came for haircuts. Say what it is. Unless you've got a multi-billion-dollar budget, we've learned, you don't say clever. Here's a quote. Clarity beats cleverness today. People are trying to be clever and weird and wild. Just say the thing. We sell haircuts. I'll give you even one more example. So I'm being driven to an event. It's a big convention center. The CEO picked me up at the hotel, and I'm looking out the highway, and it's in California. And I was just kind of looking out the window, as we're talking and stuff. And I was just like, okay, there's malls and stores along that highway. And then I looked at one and like, whoa, just because that store, every parking lot was full. What? That was just like, oh. And I looked up and I thought, they're winning on clarity, because above that store was a bold, bright, one-word sign that told even out-of-towners why to get off the highway and get to that store, and you could see it a mile away. That one word, liquor. But the point is, they didn't say, fun spirits that make you feel good, or they said liquor. They said that, and that, that was super clear. And most people aren't. They think they're clear and they're not. And so clarity. So I'll give, maybe it's good. I'll give you a quick overview of like at least one tool here, a simple one. If you want your message to matter today, you're talking to your team, make sure it is MRA. Make sure it is memorable, make sure it is repeatable, and make sure it is actionable. MRA, most things aren't. Most things, like even values people have, they're not really actionable. Oh, we have a value of integrity. What does that look like? And if you don't have it, you go to jail. Make it actionable. And so for us, like one of our values is being the same on stage and off. Everybody here at the Institute has a stage. Mine is often a literal stage. But when Emily's on the phone, 20 feet from me through that door, she's on stage. When Dan is talking to certified partners, he's on stage. So we can see that, because I've seen speakers that are a lot different on stage and off. So I said, I don't want to be like that. What does integrity or this value we have look like in this space? A great case study on this is Caribou Coffee. In Minnesota, they went number 2 to Starbucks in their space in the 2000s because they had a crystal clear 4-letter acronym that they taught their baristas, and they started acting that out across the country in 40 states or something at the time. Then, and by the way, I know the CEO now, he's great in bringing clarity back, and I know the CEO then, and he was great. But they went for a time to massive growth mode. They hired a bunch of brilliant Ivy League and others, people. They lost clarity, and they lost in many ways because they took away that way of acting that everybody could remember and act by. Let me give one more clarity tool. And it is one of the biggest frustrations we see in the index is people not being clear about expectations. So here's one way to think about expectations. I call it ODC. Now remember, my first role in leadership was in another country, Arkansas. And so, by the way, I love Arkansas, best board of directors I ever had, but I was an outsider. Everybody was from there. I was kind of an outsider. I was even called a Yankee. I didn't know I was, whatever. But I wasn't getting what I wanted from my team. So I started thinking, what can I do? And I started to get super clear about not how to manage them so much, but the outcome. So O is outcome. What is the outcome you can see, even if you can't see the final outcome? Because in your space, you might not have people that have a 1-year goal, a 3-year plan, that can change, right?
Yes.
I remember being on the phone with McChrystal. He's led in really one of the toughest times in the Afghan war, and they were trying to find this most significant person. They couldn't find him. And finally he said, we got to pull back and have meetings every day, not every week. So he pulled back and had intelligence meetings, 30 minutes every single morning, 2,200 people around the country or whatever on that call, and said, what do we know today? What do we know today? And they made a plan for that day. He pulled back to what can I see? In the pandemic, we planted a flag. The first flag we planted was, okay, by Friday, let's do this. We don't know what that's going to be like, but what's that? Pull back to clarity. But the outcome, what's the outcome that you can see? It doesn't have to be a 90. It's like, what's the outcome? Share that. Many leaders will not share what they can see. They say, well, I don't know everything. So show what is the first thing you can see? Share the outcome. D is deadline. Deadline has an exact time attached. So I might say to this person, okay, we need this thing. Can we see it Friday morning at 10 a.m.? That's a moment in time. And then C in ODC is clarifying questions, like clarifiers. Are you clear? Are we on the same page? Let them spit it back to you. But just in my mind, running through ODC helps people get to clarity, and it helps. I was scared to give deadlines. I was afraid of conflict. Not giving it ensures conflict because soon means different things to different people. So there's 2 tools. There's one, the first pillar, clarity, MRA and ODC. Couple of tools you can use tomorrow morning. There's a whole lot more. If you'd like them, we'll give access, to those. But these things can work at home too. I've had people say it tripled their sales. I've had people say it saved their marriage. Yeah. I don't mind what it does because people, turns out, with better marriages are better at work.
Yes, absolutely.
So, like on the ODC thing, I said, I got to use it myself. Like, my girls were not too old. Their room was a disaster. I said, okay, girls, how about this? I don't want to be a domineering dad. We're not going to do all these things. Let's just have outcome be two things. One, no clothes on the floor. Do you know what clothes are? Yeah, Dad. Do you know where the floor is? It's under there somewhere. Okay, great. No clothes. Number two, the bedspread or the comforter over the pillow. Okay? What does this mean? I can't whine about plastic necklaces on the dresser. I don't know what's going on in the closet or under the bed. In fact, I don't even know what's happening under the comforter, that big bulge. All I know is no clothes on the floor. That's going to be a clean room. Deadline Saturday mornings before you play. And are we clear? Yep, we're clear. So the girls come down the first Saturday. Oh, can we go play with our friends? I'm like, yeah, it's a free Saturday. I think that sounds good. But is your room clean? And two little girls could go up and see, oh, yeah, this and this, right? Because it's clear enough. And so a lot of times as leaders, we're not given clarity, and so people can't win.
One of the things I was just curious about, and you kind of mentioned this as we gone, but can you share a story where trust either made or broke a team in a high stress moment where you've seen it, where maybe they were doing really good and all of a sudden there was this high stress moment? It might have been the pandemic, might have been something else where that trust either made or broke the team.
Oh, I've seen a lot of and as you know, one of the boards I've been on is out in D.C. where I bring equal number of Republicans and Democrats from Capitol Hill together. And what I'll say there, I mean, that's not the one I was going to land on, but I was just thinking even in D.C., so we have this private board where senators and representatives from the Hill, we only bring the same number together to each meeting. So if it's 10 Republicans, it's got to be 10 Democrats.
Okay.
And these are often not the people on Fox News or MSNBC. They want to get something done. They're not as worried about getting their face on things. But we did an activity that we call it the Trust Shield. It's one of our really cool activities. I've done it with senior leadership teams of some of the biggest companies in the world, done it with pro sports team, college sports team. One of the college teams said there's two tools of ours they used, and they went from like 2-8 to 8-2 the next year or something like that regular season. They said this was one of the things that solidified them as a team. But it was interesting. We did this and this process, and at the end of that day, they started working together differently. So that was just a glimpse. I'm thinking of that day with them of doing this trust. It amplifies and speeds up trust building, basically. So that Trust Shield activity is super powerful. I just did a group of CEOs last week, and one of them said that was the best 6 minutes of my 2026.
Wow. And
so I think it's like there's a portion of that time. So I've seen that help them. I've also seen, I'll take a really big company, Fortune 5. This senior leader was over 116,000 of the 400 or so thousand employees. Brilliant people, as you can imagine, but pretty poisonous leadership team. And one interesting thing we did with them is one of the poisons they had was, or one of the things that was causing a lack of trust was you got a senior leader. It's a tough guy, but he's also really consensus driven. Mostly because he doesn't want people to not like him, I think, partly. And so you got all these brilliant people, and look, they're over a massive organization. And finally, we said, they've got the values of the company, mission of the company. Let's just come up with how we're going to act with each other. Because we have one big problem here. And that is, you guys decide something in a meeting, and then you leave the meeting, and one of you didn't like it, but didn't say it there. You go talk to him, you shift the plan. You convince that person, like, okay, and you guys shift it without all being in the room. So we came up with a set of virtues for this team. And I said it right in there. And I lovingly, and I have a lot of respect of the team. So you don't just come in as a consultant guy and do this. But I said to the main guys, like, hey, you can't do that anymore. You cannot listen. Everybody agree? No one can go to him, and he will not listen. And this is how you need to act. And I kind of, I had a lot of trust built with my outside authority of like, nobody's doing this anymore.
Yeah, right.
And then we came up with a set of virtues. And I still remember the first virtue was something like, we are going to, in our meetings, discuss, debate, decide, and outside of this room, defend with one voice that decision. And then if they want to make a different decision, there's a way to do that in the next meeting. Or if they want to share a concern, they can do that directly with him, but it will not be decided again without one voice. That little simple idea we're sharing on a podcast was massively transformative for this team because they did get it, and they did decide to go by those virtues, and that's one of them, So, so that's where trust won over time for a massive company that might be affecting everybody, you and me, actually, in this world. So there's times when it hasn't won. I mean, a great example of it, when I can't take so much credit here, but we have done work in East Africa.
Okay.
And really amazing when you see two people humble themselves after decades of conflict and decide they're going to do what's better for the world. And when, we've done some work in policing stuff, but this is something I want to just not really, people know I've been over it a lot. I cannot take credit for any of this. Okay.
Yeah.
But, President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, the opposition, and they'd been opposing for however long in Kenya, and nobody would believe they'd even shake hands. And it's even known in the country now as the hug shake, where they kind of stood by each other and shook hands. But it was a monumental change where they both decided, this isn't the legacy we want to leave. We're going to actually come together. And it was, that's a monumental example when trust can be built. And part of that, as you can imagine there, is that character and compassion pillar, which is selflessness, and saying, I'm, going to kind of come under, I'm going to sacrifice for the better good.
That's fantastic. That's awesome, David. Wow. That's cool. I mean, and how neat that you get to see some of the impact of your work across. And I know, like you said, you're not taking credit for it, but the impact of the work that you're doing out there is just absolutely phenomenal. That is so cool.
I mean, I have seen, by the way, I'm passionate about this work because I go speak all around the world and nobody can spell my last name. I couldn't till 8th grade, no problem. But people think differently about trust. And now we've had the Admiral of the Navy, after we trained 15,000 sailors, say we dropped suicide rates. That was our metric.
Wow.
We've had people triple sales in 90 days. We've had attrition drop in one of the biggest, many places. We had a big Fortune 50 company gain 11% market share and credit this trust work to it. I think when people shift thinking to the real issue of trust, they solve things. I told this before, but we've had people say, a big burly teary-eyed sales guy came up to me and said, this helped triple my sales and it saved my marriage. And I'm like, that's even better. So
yes.
I'm passionate. The truth is, Drew, this work has changed me along the way, and it's still changing me. So, I get to see it daily. It's not David. It's just truth. And it's this research and trust work that a lot of the team has been on. And I'm totally imperfect at all of it too, just so you know.
No, I love that though. But thank you for sharing that. And I absolutely love the work you're doing. David, can you recommend 2 books for my audience that you think they should read? Maybe one of your 5 books, because I've read Trust Matters. I absolutely love it. I was on vacation. I was highlighting things. It was amazing. So one of your 5, maybe one outside of your 5. Yeah. Could you go ahead and recommend that?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple. Of mine, I think Trust Matters is a good place to start. Trust Matters more than ever because it's got the 40 tools. It's quick. It's easy. Boom. Compared to like Trust Edge is really actionable too, but 365 pages that came right after my research and all that. A really fun read, just so you know of mine, I'm not trying to give too many, but Trusted Leader is a fun, easy read. That's a story and then you apply it. But I think, anyway, throw all that out. I think Trust Matters more than ever would be a great place to start.
Absolutely.
There's lots of great books out there. Be a reader. But one of them that I'm thinking about some right now, and I've read it a couple times at least, is Excellence Wins by Horst Schulze, the founder of Ritz-Carlton. And I just love the way he thinks, treats people. He went on to then build another hotel chain that is even way level ahead of, above like the biggest, nicest hotel award in the world or whatever. But he's such a down-to-earth, amazing guy in how he thinks about just treating people. The reason Chick-fil-A says my pleasure is Horst Schulze was in the room when said, when the Cathys and they're gathering and Horst just speaks up and says, I don't know, this is what we do at the Ritz, so you maybe find something else and, figure out something, but it just kind of gets people the right mind frame. We say my pleasure, so you can think, and the Catholics like, well, we're doing that exactly. Right? Anyway, that's a good. Excellence Wins is a great book, I think, and I could give you a lot more.
Fantastic. And then, David, how can people get a hold of you, or they could buy your book? How can people do that?
Well, they can go anywhere books are sold. And if you can spell my last name, you can find me, Horsager, Horsager. David Horsager is, me personally speaking site and everything. But another easy one, if you can remember, our institute is trustedge.com. Trustedge.com. And you can find, all this stuff, LinkedIn, whatever. But LinkedIn's probably a good place to link up. But trustedge.com can get you anywhere in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. And I saw that you were just in an airport and you saw your book there, and I thought that was so cool. What a cool thing to see. Yeah, super cool. Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and the work you're doing to help leaders and teams build trust in the world that needs it more than ever. This was a great conversation, and to everybody listening, thanks for tuning in to Iron and Empathy. If this episode brought you value, be sure to share it with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you next time. Thank you, David.
Thank you.